If she dies, let me know. I'm not dealing with paperwork tonight." Those were the words my son spoke when the hospital called to tell him his mother might not survive the night. I didn't hear them myself, of course. I was unconscious at the time, bleeding internally, my ribs fractured in 3 places, my left lung partially collapsed. But later, when I woke up with tubes running out of my arms and a breathing mask fogged with my own shallow breath, a nurse told me exactly what had been said. And I want you to understand something. I'm 73 years old. I've buried a husband, raised a child alone, survived breast cancer, and learned to live on a fixed income that doesn't always stretch to the end of the month. I thought I knew what heartbreak felt like. I was wrong. Before I go any further, I want to ask you something. Wherever you are right now, whatever time it is where you're watching this, I'd love to know. Are you listening to this at work, late at night when you can't sleep, on your morning commute? Drop a comment and tell me where you're from and what time it is. And if this story resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe. Because what I'm about to share needs to be heard. It needs to be remembered. Now let me take you back to that hospital room. The first thing I remember is the beeping. Steady, rhythmic, relentless. Then the smell, that particular cocktail of antiseptic and floor cleaner that tells you you're somewhere clinical, somewhere serious. My eyes wouldn't open at first. They felt glued shut, weighted down. When I finally managed to pry them apart, the fluorescent lights above me were so bright I had to squint. Everything hurt. Not the sharp, screaming kind of pain, but the deep, whole-body ache that tells you something very bad has happened. My chest felt tight, restricted. My left arm throbbed. There was a pulling sensation near my abdomen, and when I tried to shift my weight, fire shot through my ribs. A face appeared above me. A young woman in scrubs, her dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, her eyes kind but tired. "Helen," she said softly. "Helen, can you hear me?" I tried to speak, but my throat was raw, my mouth dry as paper. All I managed was a croak. She reached for a small cup with a sponge on a stick and dabbed my lips with water. "Don't try to talk just yet. You've been through a lot. You were in a car accident yesterday evening. Do you remember?" Yesterday evening. Thanksgiving. I had been driving to my son's house. The pies in the back seat, the highway, the truck that came out of nowhere. The impact. I nodded, just barely. "You're at County General," the nurse continued. "You were brought in by ambulance. You had some serious injuries, Helen. Broken ribs, internal bleeding, a partially collapsed lung. You needed emergency surgery." Surgery. The word floated in my head, heavy and strange. I hadn't consented to surgery. Had I? I couldn't remember signing anything. I couldn't remember much of anything after the airbag deployed and the world went sideways. "We tried to reach your emergency contact," she said, and something in her voice shifted. Something careful, measured. "Your son, Jason, is that right?" I nodded again. Jason, my only child. The boy I raised alone after his father died when he was 12. The man I still called every Sunday, even though he rarely answered. The one who always said he was too busy, too stressed, too overwhelmed with his own life to visit very often. But surely, in an emergency, he would have come. Surely he would have dropped everything. The nurse's expression tightened just slightly. She glanced toward the door, then back at me. "Helen, I need to tell you something, and I want you to stay calm, all right? Your vitals are stable now, but you need to rest." My heart rate picked up. The monitor beside me beeped faster. "What happened?" I managed to whisper. She hesitated. Then she pulled a chair closer to my bed and sat down, her hands folded in her lap. "When you were brought in, you were in critical condition. The doctors determined you needed surgery immediately to stop the internal bleeding and reinflate your lung. But because you were unconscious, they needed consent from your next of kin." "Jason," I whispered. "Yes." The staff called him multiple times. They explained the situation. They told him you might not make it through the night without the procedure. My chest tightened, not from the injury this time, but from something else. Something cold and creeping. And I breathed. The nurse's jaw tightened. She looked me straight in the eye, and I could see she didn't want to say what came next. But she did anyway. He said, and I'm quoting directly from the notes here, "If she dies, let me know. I'm not dealing with paperwork tonight." The room went silent except for the beeping of the machines. I stared at her. waiting for her to laugh, to tell me it was a mistake, a misunderstanding, a cruel joke. She didn't. He said he was hosting a Thanksgiving party, she continued quietly. He told the staff he couldn't leave. He refused to come to the hospital. He refused to sign the consent forms. I couldn't breathe. Not because of my lung, but because the weight of those words had just collapsed everything inside me. If she dies, let me know. I'm not dealing with paperwork tonight. My son. My only son. The boy I had rocked to sleep when he had nightmares. The teenager I had worked 2 jobs to send to college. The man I had bailed out of financial trouble more than once, always telling him it was fine. That's what mothers do. He couldn't be bothered to leave his party. He couldn't be bothered to sign a piece of paper that might save my life. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not yet. Not in front of this stranger who was looking at me with such pity I wanted to scream. Then how? I started, my voice shaking. How am I here? How did the surgery happen? The nurse's expression softened. Just a little. Someone else signed, she said. I blinked. What? Someone else showed up. Someone who wasn't listed as your emergency contact, but who knew you. He convinced the doctors to let him sign as your temporary medical guardian. He stayed through the entire surgery. He's been checking on you every few hours since. My mind scrambled, trying to make sense of this. Who? She glanced down at the clipboard in her hands, then back at me. His name is Jamal Carter. The world tilted. Jamal. I hadn't heard that name in years. Maybe a decade. Maybe longer. Jamal Carter? I repeated, my voice barely audible. She nodded. Do you know him? Did I know him? Oh, I knew him. But the question wasn't whether I knew him. The question was why on earth he would have been there. Why he would have signed. Why he would have cared at all. And as I lay there in that hospital bed, with my son's words still ringing in my ears and a name from my past suddenly reappearing like a ghost, I realized something. My life had almost ended on that highway, but something else had ended too. The nurse stood up, adjusting the IV line. He left his number with the front desk, said to call him when you woke up. Should I? I didn't answer right away. I just stared at the ceiling, my mind spinning, my heart breaking and mending and breaking again all at once. Finally I whispered, yes, because whoever Jamal Carter was now, whatever had brought him to that hospital, he had done something my own son wouldn't do. He had shown up. Let me take you back to the beginning. To the moment everything changed. It was Thanksgiving Eve, late afternoon. The sky had already started to darken. That early winter dusk that comes too soon and lingers too long. I was driving on Interstate 94, heading toward my son's house in the suburbs. My hands gripped the steering wheel a little too tightly, the way they always did when I made this drive. I had 2 pumpkin pies on the passenger seat beside me, store-bought, but dressed up with fresh whipped cream I'd made that morning. I'd also brought a green bean casserole, the one Jason used to ask for every year when he was younger. He hadn't asked for it in probably 15 years, but I made it anyway. Old habits. The radio played softly, some holiday station cycling through the same dozen songs everyone knows by heart. I wasn't really listening. My mind was too busy running through its usual checklist of worries. Would Brooke, Jason's wife, find something wrong with what I brought? She usually did. Too much salt, not organic enough. Store-bought crust instead of homemade. Last Easter, she'd actually handed my deviled eggs back to me at the door and suggested I'd be more comfortable just bringing wine next time. I had still brought the casserole. I told myself this year would be different. This year I wouldn't try so hard. I wouldn't hover in the kitchen asking if I could help. I wouldn't laugh too loudly at Jason's jokes or ask too many questions about the grandchildren I barely saw. I would just be present, quiet, grateful to be included. That's what I always told myself. And then I always ended up doing exactly what I'd promised myself I wouldn't do. Because the truth was, I was desperate. Desperate to feel like I mattered to my own child. Desperate to feel like I belonged in his life. The highway stretched ahead of me, 3 lanes of light traffic. Thanksgiving travelers, most of them. Families heading toward warmth and noise and tables full of food. I wondered how many of them were driving toward people who actually wanted them there. I shook the thought away. That wasn't fair. Jason wanted me there. He'd invited me, hadn't he? Well, Brooke had sent a text 3 weeks ago with the time and a reminder to please arrive promptly. That counted as an invitation. The temperature had dropped throughout the day. I could see my breath when I'd gotten into the car, even with the heater running. The roads were dry, though. No ice. No snow yet. I'd checked the weather 3 times before leaving, the way I always did, because the last thing I wanted was to be a burden, to cause problems, to make anyone worry about me. If only I'd known that worry was the last thing my son would feel. Traffic slowed as I approached the junction where 94 meets Route 12. Construction had narrowed the lanes, funneling everyone into a tight merge. I eased off the gas, giving the car ahead of me plenty of space. Defensive driving, that's what my late husband used to call it. Helen, he'd say, you drive like you're taking a test every time. Maybe I did. Maybe I still do. The semi-truck appeared in my rearview mirror about a quarter-mile back. I noticed it because it was moving faster than everything else, weaving between lanes. Not aggressively, exactly, but with a kind of impatient confidence that made me nervous. I've never liked driving near big trucks. They make me feel small, vulnerable. Like one wrong move and I just disappear beneath their wheels. I moved into the right lane, thinking I'd let it pass. Safer that way. But the truck moved right too. Then everything happened at once. The car in front of me braked suddenly. Brake lights flared red in the dimming light. I hit my own brakes, firm but controlled, and my car slowed smoothly. No problem. But the truck behind me didn't slow. I saw it in my mirror, still coming too fast, way too fast. For a split second, I thought maybe the driver would swerve, change lanes, avoid me. He didn't. The impact was like being hit by a wall of sound and force and terror all at once. Metal shrieked, glass exploded. My body jerked forward against the seatbelt so hard I felt something crack in my chest. The airbag deployed with a bang that left my ears ringing. My head snapped sideways, and I felt a sharp pain shoot down my neck. The car spun. I remember that part clearly. The world outside the windows became a blur of lights and road and sky, all tumbling together. I remember screaming, or trying to. I remember thinking, absurdly, about the pies on the seat beside me and how they were definitely ruined. Then the car hit something else. A guardrail, maybe. Another vehicle. I couldn't tell. There was a second impact, this one from the side, and my head hit the window hard enough that everything went white for a moment. When the car finally stopped moving, I was facing the wrong direction. Cars were stopped all around me, their hazard lights blinking. Steam or smoke poured from under my crumpled hood. The airbag had deflated, leaving a chalky powder all over my lap. I tried to move. My arms responded, barely. My legs wouldn't. There was a pressure in my chest like someone sitting on me. And pain. God, the pain. It radiated from my ribs, my back, my head. Everything hurt in ways I couldn't separate or identify. I could hear shouting, footsteps. A man's voice saying, "Lady, can you hear me? Stay still, okay? Don't move." I wanted to tell him I wasn't planning on moving. I couldn't if I tried. More voices joined the first. Someone was on the phone with 911. Someone else was trying to open my door, but it was jammed. The metal had crumpled inward, trapping me inside. Time became strange after that. Elastic. Moments stretched and compressed. I remember flashing lights, red and blue. I remember the sound of metal being cut, sparks flying past my window. I remember hands reaching in, gentle but urgent, touching my neck, my wrist, asking me questions I couldn't quite answer. "What's your name?" "Helen." "Do you know what day it is?" "Thanksgiving." "Who can we call?" "Jason." "My son." "Call Jason." They lifted me out of the car onto a stretcher. The movement sent lightning bolts of agony through my entire body. I must have cried out, because someone squeezed my hand and told me to hang on. Just hang on. The ambulance ride was a nightmare of sirens and speed and pain that wouldn't stop. A paramedic leaned over me, checking monitors, adjusting the oxygen mask over my face. She had kind eyes. She kept talking to me, keeping me conscious. "You're doing great, Helen. We're almost there. Stay with me, okay?" I tried to nod, but even that hurt. The hospital was chaos. Bright lights overhead, voices calling out numbers and medical terms I didn't understand. They wheeled me through automatic doors, down hallways, into a room filled with people in scrubs. Someone cut my clothes off. I remember feeling embarrassed about that, even through the pain. My underwear was old, the elastic worn. I hadn't expected anyone to see it. A doctor appeared above me, his face partially hidden behind a mask. Helen, I'm Dr. Shapiro. You've been in a serious accident. We need to run some tests and see what's going on inside, okay? I tried to say yes, but the words wouldn't come. They moved me again into another room. A CT scanner, someone said. I was slid into a white tube while machines whirred and clicked around me. When they pulled me out, the doctor's face was grimmer. We need to get her into surgery, he said to someone I couldn't see. She's bleeding internally, possible splenic rupture. 3 fractured ribs, one of which has partially collapsed the left lung. Surgery. The word registered through the fog of pain and shock. I needed someone to sign. I needed Jason. A nurse appeared beside me, phone in hand. We're calling your emergency contact now, she said. I closed my eyes, relief washing over me despite everything. Jason would come. He'd sign whenever they needed. He'd be worried, upset, but he'd be there. I heard the phone ringing on speaker. Once, twice, 3 times. Then Jason's voice, distant and distracted. Hello? Is this Jason Whitmore? Yeah, who's this? This is County General Hospital. We have your mother, Helen Whitmore, in our emergency room. She's been in a serious car accident and needs immediate surgery. We need you to come in and sign consent forms. There was a pause. Music and laughter in the background. A party. How serious? Jason asked. The nurse glanced at the doctor, then back at the phone. Life-threatening. Without surgery in the next hour, she may not survive. Another pause. Longer this time. Then, in a tone I'd never heard from my son before, flat and cold and completely devoid of concern, he said the words that would replay in my head for the rest of my life. I'm hosting Thanksgiving. If she dies, let me know. I'm not dealing with paperwork tonight. The line went dead. The nurse stared at the phone, her expression frozen in disbelief. Dr. Shapiro's jaw tightened. Call again. He couldn't have meant that. But I knew. Even as the darkness pulled me under, even as they lowered the mask over my face and told me to count backward from 10, I knew. My son had meant every word. When I woke up the second time, the pain was different. Duller. Manageable. Whatever they'd given me was working, wrapping everything in a soft, medicinal haze that made the world feel slightly unreal. The same nurse from before was there, checking something on the monitor beside my bed. She noticed my eyes open and smiled, but it was a sad smile. The kind people give you when they know something you don't want to hear. Or in my case, something I'd already heard and wished I could unhear. How are you feeling? She asked, adjusting the flow on my IV. I tried to speak, but my throat was still raw. She offered me that sponge again, let me wet my lips. Sore, I finally managed. That's to be expected. You've been through major surgery, but you came through beautifully. Dr. Shapiro was able to stop the bleeding and repair everything that needed repairing. Your lung is reinflated. You're going to be okay, Helen. Physically, maybe. But there were other kinds of damage that no surgeon could fix. The memory of what she'd told me before came rushing back. Jason's words. His refusal. The flatness in his voice when he'd said those unthinkable things. I must have made some kind of sound, because her expression shifted to concern. Do you need more pain medication? I shook my head. The pain I was feeling wasn't the kind that came in a syringe. She pulled the chair closer again and sat down. This was clearly going to be another difficult conversation. Helen, I know what I told you earlier was incredibly hard to hear, but I want you to know that you're not alone. Someone made sure of that. I looked at her, confused. After your son refused to sign the consent forms, we were in a very difficult position. We couldn't legally proceed without next of kin approval, but we also couldn't just let you die. Dr. Shapiro was about to petition for emergency judicial override when someone showed up in the waiting room. My heart beat a little faster. The monitor beside me registered the change. A man came to the front desk asking about you. He'd heard about the accident on the police scanner, used to be a volunteer firefighter apparently, and he still listens to the emergency channels. When he heard your name, he drove straight here. Who? I whispered, though I already knew. She'd told me before, but my brain had been too foggy to process it fully. She looked down at the clipboard in her hands, then back at me. Jamal Carter. He told the staff he knew you, that you'd been important to him a long time ago. He was very insistent that someone needed to advocate for you. Jamal, the name settled over me like a blanket, heavy with memory and time. He convinced Dr. Shapiro to let him sign as temporary medical guardian. It's not standard procedure, but given the circumstances and given that your listed emergency contact had explicitly refused. She trailed off, leaving the sentence unfinished. I closed my eyes, tried to picture Jamal as I'd last seen him. That would have been what? 15 years ago? Maybe longer. He'd been in his early 20s then, tall and lean, with eyes that held too much hurt for someone so young. He stayed through your entire surgery, the nurse continued. Sat in the waiting room for 4 hours. When Dr. Shapiro came out to tell him you'd made it through, he cried. My chest tightened, and it had nothing to do with my broken ribs. He's been back 3 times since then to check on you. Left his phone number at the desk and made us promise to call him the moment you woke up, which, if you're up for it, I'd like to do now. I didn't trust my voice, so I just nodded. She stood up and walked to the phone mounted on the wall. I watched her dial, heard the faint ringing on the other end. Then a voice answered. Male, deeper than I remembered, but with a warmth that I recognized immediately. This is Jamal. Mr. Carter, this is County General. Helen is awake. She's stable and doing well. There was a pause, then a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob or both. Thank God. Thank God. Can I come see her? The nurse looked at me. I nodded again. Yes, she's indicated she'd like that. Visiting hours are until 8. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The line clicked off. The nurse hung up the phone and turned back to me. He sounds like a good man, she said quietly. I thought about the boy I'd known. The teenager who'd shown up at the church food pantry so many years ago, hungry and alone. The kid who'd flinched every time someone raised their voice. The young man who'd sat at my kitchen table doing homework while I made dinner. Both of us pretending it was normal, pretending he wasn't sleeping in his car most nights. He is, I whispered. Or he was. I don't know what he is now. Well, you'll find out soon enough. She made a note on my chart, then checked her watch. I'm going to give you a few minutes to rest before he arrives. But Helen, there's something else I need to tell you. My stomach dropped. What? The hospital tried calling your son again, multiple times, to let him know you'd made it through surgery, that you were stable. He didn't answer any of the calls. His wife finally picked up on the 6th try. What did she say? The nurse's lips pressed into a thin line. She said, and I quote, "We're aware of the situation. We'll deal with it after the holiday." After the holiday, I was lying in a hospital bed having barely survived surgery, and they'd deal with it after the holiday. Something inside me shifted. Not broke, exactly. It had already been broken, but it shifted into a new configuration. A harder one. I see, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I'm so sorry, Helen. I know this isn't what you want to hear, but I thought you should know. Thank you for telling me. She hesitated, like she wanted to say more, then seemed to think better of it. I'll be back to check on you in a bit. Press the call button if you need anything. She left, pulling the door partially closed behind her. I lay there in the quiet, listening to the machines beep their steady rhythms, feeling the ache in my chest that had nothing to do with fractured bones. 20 years. That's how long I'd been a mother to a child who'd grown into a man I didn't recognize. 20 years of showing up, making excuses, convincing myself that his distance was just his personality, that his coldness was just how some people showed love. I'd been lying to myself, and now I was paying the price for all those lies. But Jamal had come. A boy I'd fed and sheltered and tried to help so long ago had heard my name on a police scanner and dropped everything, had fought to be allowed to sign papers for a woman who wasn't his mother, wasn't his family, was just someone who'd shown him a little kindness when he'd needed it most. Why would he do that? The question rattled around in my head, bumping against all the other questions I didn't have answers for. Why had Jason become the kind of man who could say those words? Where had I gone wrong? What had I done to deserve such casual cruelty from the person I'd loved most in this world? I didn't have long to sit with those thoughts. 15 minutes later, I heard footsteps in the hallway, quick, purposeful, then a soft knock on the door. "Come in," I called, my voice still hoarse but stronger. The door opened, and there he was, Jamal Carter, 30-something now, filled out in the shoulders, a neat beard framing his face. He wore jeans and a simple jacket, work boots that looked well worn. His eyes found mine immediately, and I saw relief flood through them. "Miss Helen," he said, and his voice cracked on my name. I'd forgotten that he used to call me that. Miss Helen, like I was somebody worth respecting. He crossed the room in 3 strides and stopped at my bedside, his hands hovering uncertainly, like he wanted to touch me but didn't know if he should. "It's okay," I whispered. "I'm not that fragile." He took my hand gently, carefully, like I was made of glass. And then he said the words I'd been waiting my whole life to hear from my own son. "I'm so glad you're okay." I was so scared I was going to lose you. The tears I'd been holding back finally broke free, rolling down my cheeks in hot streams. Jamal's face crumpled. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you cry." "No," I managed. "No, these are good tears." He pulled the chair close and sat down, still holding my hand, and for the first time since I'd woken up in this hospital, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I was going to be all right. Jamal sat beside my bed, still holding my hand, and for a long moment neither of us spoke. We just looked at each other. 2 people separated by years and circumstances, trying to find the thread that connected us. He'd changed so much. The wary, underfed teenager I remembered had become a man with steady eyes and capable hands. But when he smiled, tentative and uncertain, I saw the boy I'd known. "You probably have questions," he said finally. "A few," I admitted, "starting with how you even knew I was here." He leaned back in the chair, but didn't let go of my hand. I still listened to the scanner, old habit from my firefighting days. I heard the call come through about the accident on 94, multiple vehicle collision, elderly female driver being transported to County General in critical condition. They said your name. "And you just came?" "Of course I came." He said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Miss Helen, you saved my life once? You think I wouldn't show up when you needed help?" I shook my head slightly. "Jamal, that was so long ago. You didn't owe me anything." His expression hardened, just a fraction. "That's not how it works, not for me." The way he said it made me wonder what his life had been like in all the years since we'd lost touch. But before I could ask, he spoke again. "Do you remember the first time we met?" I smiled despite everything. "The church basement. You were trying to steal food from the pantry." "I wasn't trying. I was succeeding, until you walked in." The memory came back sharp and clear. It had been a Wednesday evening, late fall. I'd been volunteering at St. Mark's, organizing donations, sorting canned goods, and checking expiration dates. The church kept the basement door unlocked during the day for people who needed help, but by 6 o'clock, everyone was supposed to be gone. I'd heard a noise coming from the storage area. At first, I thought it was a rat. We'd had problems with them before. But when I went to investigate, I found a teenage boy stuffing bread and canned soup into a backpack. He'd frozen when he saw me, eyes wide, ready to bolt. "I was terrified you'd call the police," Jamal said now, his voice soft with the memory. "I was terrified you'd run before I could help you," I replied. I'd done the only thing that made sense to me at the time. I'd walked over to the shelf, pulled down more cans, added a jar of peanut butter and some crackers, and handed them to him. "If you're going to take food," I'd said, "at least take things that'll keep you fed." He'd stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. "What's your name?" I'd asked. It took him a moment to answer. "Jamal." "Well, Jamal, when's the last time you had a hot meal?" He'd shrugged, trying to look tough. But his hands were shaking. "Come on," I'd said. "I'm making dinner anyway. Might as well make extra." Looking back, I know how reckless that was. Inviting a strange teenager to my home. But something in his eyes told me he wasn't dangerous, just desperate, just alone. He'd followed me home that night, cautious as a stray cat. Sat at my kitchen table while I made spaghetti and meatballs, watching me like he expected it all to disappear. When I set the plate in front of him, he'd eaten like he hadn't seen food in days. He probably hadn't. "I thought you were crazy," Jamal said now, bringing me back to the present. "Nobody just helps people like that. Not without wanting something. I didn't want anything. I know that now. But back then, I kept waiting for the catch, kept waiting for you to tell me what I owed you. You didn't owe me anything. You kept saying that. Every time I came over, every time you fed me or let me do laundry or help me with homework, you'd say, 'You don't owe me anything, Jamal. This is just what people do.'" He paused. "Except it wasn't what people did. Not in my experience. I knew some of his story. Not all of it. He'd been in foster care since he was 11, bounced between homes that didn't want him. By the time he turned 16, he'd aged out of the system's interest. Too old to be cute, too young to be independent. He'd been sleeping in his car, showing up at school when he could, trying to stay invisible. You became a regular at my table, I said. 3-4 nights a week, sometimes more. He smiled, but there was pain in it. You never made me feel like charity. You'd just say you made too much food, or you needed help moving furniture, or you wanted company. You always found a way to make it seem like I was doing you a favor. You were. I was lonely. My husband had been gone 5 years by then. Jason was away at college, calling less and less. The house felt too big, too quiet. Having Jamal around had helped fill that silence. You taught me things, he continued. How to balance a checkbook, how to file taxes, how to change a tire. All the stuff nobody had ever bothered to show me. Basic life skills. Everyone should know those things. You also taught me that not everyone in the world was out to hurt me. That was a harder lesson. I remembered the walls he'd built around himself, how long it had taken for him to trust me. The first time he'd laughed at one of my jokes, really laughed, I'd felt like I'd won something precious. What happened after you graduated high school? I asked. We'd lost touch around then. I'd always wondered. I joined the fire department as a volunteer. Needed something structured, you know? Something that felt like it mattered. Did that for a few years, then went to trade school. I'm an electrician now, have my own small business. Pride swelled in my chest. Jamal, that's wonderful. It's honest work, pays the bills. I've got a little house over on Maple Street. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. He paused. I looked for you a few times over the years, drove by your old place, but you'd moved. I downsized after Jason got married, didn't need all that space anymore. I should have tried harder to find you, should have stayed in touch. Life gets busy, I understand. No, his voice was firm. There's no excuse. You were there for me when nobody else was. I should have been there for you. You're here now, I said quietly. That's what matters. He looked down at our joined hands. When he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. When I heard your name on that scanner, Miss Helen, I swear my heart stopped. And when I got here and they told me what your son said, he stopped, jaw clenching. I'm sorry, I shouldn't talk about him. It's all right. It's not all right, none of this is all right. He met my eyes. You deserved better than that. You deserved someone who gave a damn. The tears threatened again, but I blinked them back. I kept one of your sayings with me all these years, Jamal said. Do you remember what you used to tell me when I'd mess up or feel like I wasn't worth anything? I thought back. There had been so many conversations, so many moments. You'd say, everybody deserves someone who shows up. You just haven't found yours yet. His voice cracked. You were mine, Miss Helen. You were the person who showed up. So when I heard you needed someone, there was no question. Of course I was coming. Of course I was going to make sure you were okay. I couldn't speak, couldn't find words big enough for what I was feeling. He squeezed my hand gently. You told me to call you anytime, that someone ought to show up for me. Well, now it's my turn. Someone ought to show up for you. And right there in that hospital room, with machines beeping and footsteps echoing in the hallway outside, I understood something profound. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who remember what you gave them when you had nothing to gain. Sometimes it's the ones who show up. Jamal stayed until the nurses kicked him out at the end of visiting hours. Even then, he hesitated at the door, like leaving me alone felt wrong somehow. I'll be back tomorrow, he promised, first thing in the morning. You don't have to do that. You must have work. I'm the boss. I can move things around, he smiled. Besides, where else would I be? After he left, I lay in the dark listening to the night sounds of the hospital, distant voices at the nurse's station, the squeak of rubber-soled shoes on linoleum, someone coughing in another room, the ever-present beeping of monitors. I didn't sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Jason's voice. That flat, disinterested tone. If she dies, let me know. How does a mother reconcile that? How do you make peace with the fact that the person you brought into this world, the child you sacrificed everything for, couldn't be bothered to save your life? I'd spent the last 20 years making excuses for him, He's busy, he's stressed, he has his own family to worry about, his wife is demanding, he's just not good at showing affection. But this wasn't about affection, this was about basic human decency. And my son had failed that test spectacularly. Morning came slowly. A different nurse brought breakfast, checked my vitals, helped me sit up a little straighter. The movement sent pain shooting through my ribs, but it was manageable. Everything was manageable compared to the alternative, which was being dead. "You have a visitor," the nurse said cheerfully. "That nice young man from yesterday is back." Jamal appeared in the doorway holding 2 cups of coffee and what looked like a paper bag from the bakery down the street. "I know hospital food is terrible," he said, setting everything down on the rolling table. "Brought you a blueberry muffin. Still your favorite?" I stared at him. "You remembered that?" "I remember a lot of things." He settled into the chair beside my bed, the same one he'd occupied for hours yesterday. "How'd you sleep?" "Not great." "Yeah, I figured." He pulled the lid off one of the coffees and handed it to me carefully. "Light and sweet, right? Right?" We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping coffee. It was good coffee, much better than whatever the hospital was serving. The small kindness of it made my throat tight. "I've been thinking," Jamal said finally, "about what happens when you get out of here." "I go home, I suppose, back to my apartment." "By yourself? With broken ribs and recovery ahead of you?" "I'll manage. I always do." He set his coffee down and looked at me seriously. "Miss Helen, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Has your son called? Has he come by? Has he checked on you at all?" The answer sat heavy in my chest. No. "His wife?" "No." Jamal's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice even. "Okay, so here's what's going to happen. You're not going home alone. You're coming to stay with me for a few days, maybe a week, until you're steady on your feet." "Jamal, I can't ask you to do that." "You're not asking. I'm telling you." His tone was gentle but firm. "I've got a guest room. It's small, but it's comfortable. I work from home half the time anyway, so I'll be around if you need anything. And before you argue, let me remind you that you did the exact same thing for me about 100 times. That was different." "How?" "You were a kid. You needed help. And you don't." He leaned forward. "Miss Helen, you almost died 3 days ago. You had major surgery. You can't lift anything, can't drive, probably can't even shower by yourself without help. That's not weakness. That's just reality." I wanted to protest, to insist I'd be fine, but the truth was I was terrified of going back to my empty apartment, of being alone with nothing but my thoughts and the echo of my son's cruelty. "Why are you doing this?" I asked quietly. He looked surprised by the question. "You really don't know?" "I gave you some meals. Let you use my washing machine. That doesn't warrant all this." "Is that really what you think you did?" He shook his head slowly. "Miss Helen, you gave me the first safe place I'd had in 5 years. You treated me like I mattered, like I was worth something. Do you have any idea how rare that is? I just did what anyone would do." "No." His voice was sharp now, not angry but insistent. "That's not what anyone would do. Most people crossed the street when they saw me. Most people assumed I was trouble. You saw a hungry kid and you fed him. You saw someone struggling and you helped. No judgment, no conditions, no strings attached. You were a good kid. I was a scared kid. A angry kid. I shoplifted, I skipped school, I got into fights. I wasn't some innocent victim." He paused, "But you looked past all that. You saw something in me I couldn't see in myself." I didn't know what to say to that. "There was this moment," Jamal continued, his voice softer now. "Must have been 2 months after we met. I was at your place doing homework, and I knocked over a glass of water. Just an accident, but I flinched so hard I nearly fell out of the chair. I was waiting for you to yell, to hit me, to throw me out." I remembered that night. The way he'd gone pale, his whole body tensed for violence that never came. "You just handed me some paper towels and said, 'No use crying over spilled water.' Then you got me another glass and went back to making dinner like nothing happened." He smiled, but his eyes were wet. "That's when I knew you were different. That's when I started to believe maybe the world wasn't all bad." "Oh, Jamal, you told me that night, you call me anytime. Someone ought to show up for you. I never forgot that, never." He reached out and took my hand again. So when I heard you were here, when I found out what your son said, there was no question in my mind. Someone needed to show up for you, and that someone was going to be me. The tears came then, hot and fast, and I couldn't stop them. You don't think I'd let you die, do you, Miss Helen? His voice broke. After everything you did for me? You don't think I'd just walk away? I don't deserve this, I whispered. Yes, you do. You deserve every bit of kindness you showed me reflected back at you 1,000 times over. He squeezed my hand. And if your son can't see that, if he's too busy or too cold or too whatever to be here, then that's his loss, his failure, not yours. Something shifted in me then. A weight I'd been carrying for years, the weight of constantly trying to earn my son's love, suddenly felt lighter. I raised him wrong, I said. I must have, otherwise he wouldn't be like this. No. Jamal's voice was firm. You can't blame yourself for how he turned out. You did your best. Sometimes people just choose to be selfish. That's on them, not you. But how did I not see it? How did I miss all the signs? Because you loved him, and love makes us blind sometimes. He paused. But you know what? I think part of you did see it. You just didn't want to believe it. He was right. Some part of me had always known that Jason's distance wasn't just personality or circumstance. It was choice. He'd chosen his comfort over my needs, his convenience over my life. What do I do now? I asked. Now? Jamal smiled. Now you let me take care of you for a change. You rest, you heal, and you stop making excuses for people who don't deserve them. A knock on the door interrupted us. Another nurse appeared, this one older, with graying hair and kind eyes. Helen, there's someone here to see you. She glanced at Jamal, then back at me, her expression uncertain. Your daughter-in-law. My stomach dropped. Brooke, Jason's wife. Jamal stood immediately, his posture protective. Do you want me to stay? I thought about it. Part of me wanted him to leave, to avoid the confrontation. But another part, a stronger part, wanted him right there beside me. Yes, I said. Please stay. He nodded and moved to stand near the head of my bed, close enough that I could feel his presence. Send her in, I told the nurse. The door opened wider and Brooke walked in. She looked exactly as I remembered. Perfectly styled blonde hair, expensive clothes, that expression she always wore that suggested she was tolerating something unpleasant. Her eyes swept over me briefly, then landed on Jamal with obvious disapproval. Mother Helen, she said, her voice cool and formal. She never called me Mom, never even called me Helen. Always Mother Helen, like it was a title rather than a relationship. Brooke, I see you're recovering. She didn't sit down, didn't come closer, just stood there near the door like she might need to make a quick exit. We were quite shocked to hear about your accident. Shocked, not worried, not concerned, shocked. Were you? It wasn't a question. Of course. Jason has been beside himself. The lie hung in the air between us, so obvious it was almost funny. Has he? I said flatly. Jamal shifted beside me. I could feel his anger radiating off him like heat. Well, you know how busy he is. The holiday, the guests, his work obligations. Brooke waved her hand dismissively. It's been very stressful. I nearly died, I said quietly. She had the grace to look uncomfortable, but only for a moment. Yes, well, these things happen. The important thing is you're fine now. No thanks to your husband. Her lips thinned. I don't know what you've been told, but Jason tried his best to handle the situation appropriately. Appropriately, I let the word sit there. Is that what we're calling it? Mother Helen, I don't think this is the time for dramatics. Jamal spoke then, his voice low and controlled. The hospital has a recording of the phone call. Would you like to hear what your husband actually said? Brooke's eyes widened slightly. She looked at Jamal like she was seeing him for the first time. And you are? Someone who actually showed up, he replied evenly. She turned back to me, clearly flustered. Look, I came here as a courtesy, to make sure you were being taken care of, to see what you needed. What I needed was for my son to sign a piece of paper so I wouldn't die on an operating table. That's what I needed. And he couldn't be bothered. He was hosting important clients. It was a business obligation. I was dying. You're being dramatic. Something inside me snapped, not loudly, not violently, just a clean, sharp break. Get out, I said. Brooke blinked. Excuse me? Get out of my room and tell my son that if he wants to speak to me, he can come himself. I'm done with intermediaries. Mother Helen, you're being unreasonable. Out. My voice was stronger now. Now. She stood there for another moment, clearly debating whether to argue. Then she turned on her expensive heels and walked out, the door swinging shut behind her with a soft click. The silence that followed felt enormous. Then, Jamal started laughing. Not cruel laughter, but the kind that comes from relief and pride and joy all mixed together. "Miss Helen," he said, grinning, "that was beautiful. And despite everything, despite the pain and the heartbreak and the betrayal, I found myself smiling too. Because for the first time in 20 years, I'd stopped making excuses, and it felt like freedom." The days that followed Brooke's visit settled into a strange rhythm. Physical therapy in the mornings, painful but necessary, meals that I could barely taste, sleep that came in fits and starts. And through it all, the deafening silence from my son. No phone call, no text message, not even a flowers delivery with one of those generic cards that said, "Thinking of you." Nothing. Jamal came every day, sometimes twice. He'd bring me things from the outside world, a magazine, a decent cup of soup. Once he brought me a small potted plant because he said the room needed life in it. He'd sit and tell me about his work, about the houses he was wiring, about the old lady down the street from him who kept asking him to fix things that weren't actually broken because she was lonely. "Kind of like someone else I know," he'd said with a knowing smile. The nurses noticed. They'd comment on what a devoted son I had, and I'd stopped correcting them. Let them think what they wanted. Jamal showed more devotion in a single visit than Jason had shown in years. On the fourth day, a social worker came to see me. Her name was Sally, and she had the worn, compassionate look of someone who'd heard every sad story there was to hear and still managed to care. She pulled up a chair and opened a folder. "Helen, I'm here to talk with you about your discharge plan. The doctors say you'll be ready to leave in a few days, but we need to make sure you have adequate support at home." "I'll be fine," I said automatically. She gave me a look that said she'd heard that before too. "You've had major surgery. You have mobility restrictions. You can't lift anything over 5 pounds for at least 6 weeks. You'll need help with basic tasks. I'm staying with a friend for the first week or so. The young man who's been visiting? Jamal?" "Yes," she made a note. "That's good. And after that, do you have family nearby who can check in on you?" The question hung there like a trap. "My son lives about 30 minutes away," I said carefully. "Have you spoken with him about what kind of help he can provide?" "No." Sally looked up from her notes. Her expression was neutral, but I could see the question in her eyes. "He's very busy," I added, hating myself for making excuses again even as the words left my mouth. "I see." She set down her pen. "Helen, I'm going to be direct with you. This isn't the first time I've seen a situation like this. Family members who are absent during a medical crisis often remain absent during recovery. I want you to have realistic expectations about the support you'll actually receive." "I know my son," I said, but even I could hear how hollow it sounded. "I'm sure you do, but I also know that hoping for help that doesn't come can be more damaging than accepting the reality and planning accordingly." She pulled out another form. "I'd like to talk with you about updating your emergency contact information." My heart started beating faster. "What do you mean?" "Right now, your son is still listed as your primary emergency contact and medical power of attorney. Given what happened when you were admitted, I'd strongly recommend reconsidering that arrangement." The room felt smaller suddenly. Changing my emergency contact felt like admitting defeat, like officially acknowledging that my relationship with my son was broken beyond repair. But wasn't it? Hadn't the break already happened? I was just finally seeing it for what it was. "What would I need to do?" I asked quietly. "It's a simple form. You designate someone else as your primary contact, someone you trust to make medical decisions on your behalf if you're unable to." She paused. "The young man who signed for your surgery, would he be willing?" "I haven't asked him. Would you like me to ask him? He's in the waiting room." I nodded, not trusting my voice. Sally stepped out. I could hear the murmur of voices in the hallway. A minute later, Jamal came in, his expression concerned. "Miss Helen? Everything okay?" "They want to change my emergency contact," I said. "Remove Jason and put you instead. I know it's a lot to ask and you don't have to say yes." He didn't even hesitate. "Of course I'll do it. It's a big responsibility. Medical decisions, end-of-life care. All of it." I understand. Jamal, I need you to really think about this. If something happens to me, if I'm in a coma or worse, you'd be the one making the hard choices. He pulled the chair close and sat down, taking my hand. Miss Helen, I'd be honored to be that person for you. You trusted me with a lot more than that when I was just some punk kid stealing food. I'm not going to let you down now. Sally handed him the forms. He read through them carefully, asked a few questions about the legal implications, then signed his name in neat, careful letters. Just like that, my son was no longer the person who would speak for me if I couldn't speak for myself. Sally witnessed the signature and made copies. This is effective immediately, she said, handing me one. I'll update your file and notify your medical team. After she left, Jamal and I sat in silence for a moment. How do you feel? He asked. Lighter, I admitted. And guilty for feeling lighter. Don't. You did what you needed to do. He squeezed my hand. And for what it's worth, I take this seriously. I promise I'll always advocate for what you want, not what's easiest. I know you will. That evening, after Jamal had gone home, I lay awake thinking about all the ways I'd tied myself to Jason. Emergency contacts, medical power of attorney, my will, which left everything to him, the key to my apartment that he'd never used, the standing invitation to Sunday dinners that he'd stopped accepting years ago. All these threads connecting me to someone who'd made it clear I wasn't a priority. The next morning, a volunteer came around with a cart of books and magazines. She was an older woman, maybe my age, with bright eyes and a warm smile. Anything catch your interest, dear? She asked. I'm fine, thank you. She started to move on, then paused. You know, I've been volunteering here for 12 years. I've seen a lot of patients come through. And I've learned that the ones who do best are the ones who let people help them. I'm not very good at that. Most of us aren't. We spend our whole lives taking care of other people. When it's our turn to receive care, we don't know how to accept it. She set a paperback on my side table. Something to think about. After she left, I picked up the book. It was a mystery novel, nothing special, but the fact that a stranger had thought to offer it, had taken a moment to talk with me, meant more than she probably knew. Meanwhile, my phone sat silent on the table. No calls, no messages, just the time and date staring back at me. On the 6th day, Jamal arrived with unexpected news. I talked to Dr. Shapiro this morning. He says you can be discharged tomorrow if you're ready. That's good. So we'll get you settled at my place, make sure you're comfortable, and then we'll take it day by day. He sat down. But there's something else I want to talk with you about. What's that? Your apartment. When you're ready, I think we should go through it. Make sure it's set up for your recovery. Clear some space, move furniture if needed, install some grab bars in the bathroom, that kind of thing. You don't have to do all that. I know I don't have to. I want to. He leaned forward. But I also think while we're there, you should go through some of your paperwork. Your will, your financial documents, all that stuff. Make sure everything reflects what you actually want, not what you set up 20 years ago when things were different. He was right, of course. But the thought of it exhausted me. Not everything has to be decided right now, Jamal continued. But start thinking about it. Start thinking about what you want your life to look like going forward. Who you want in it, who you don't. That last part hung in the air between us. I keep waiting for him to call, I admitted. I keep thinking maybe he'll come through that door and apologize and explain and make it all make sense somehow. And if he doesn't, then I guess I'll have my answer. Jamal nodded slowly. You deserve better than waiting for crumbs of affection from someone who should be giving you the whole loaf. The truth of that statement hit me hard. I'd been living on crumbs for years. A brief phone call here, an obligatory holiday visit there, the occasional "love you, Mom" tossed out as he was hanging up. And I'd convinced myself that was enough. That I should be grateful for whatever small pieces of attention he was willing to give. But it wasn't enough. It had never been enough. Tomorrow we get you out of here, Jamal said, standing up. And then we start figuring out what comes next. On your terms, not his. After he left, I did something I should have done days ago. I picked up my phone and opened my messages. Found Jason's name, and I typed, "I'm being discharged tomorrow. I'm staying with a friend for my recovery. I've changed my emergency contact. If you want to talk, you know where to find me. I read it 3 times. Then I hit send. The message showed as delivered. Then a minute later as read. I waited. 10 minutes, 20, an hour. No response. And somehow that silence said more than any words could have. It told me everything I needed to know about where I stood in my son's life. Nowhere. I turned off my phone and set it face down on the table. Tomorrow I would leave this hospital room. Tomorrow I would start healing, not just physically, but in all the other ways I'd been broken. And tomorrow, I would stop waiting for my son to become the person I'd always hoped he'd be. Because at 73 years old, I was finally learning that some people never change. And some silences are louder than screams. I was packing the few belongings I'd accumulated during my hospital stay when the knock came. Not the usual hospital knock, the perfunctory tap before someone entered. This was different. Hesitant. Almost apologetic. "Come in," I called. The door opened, and there stood Brooke. Again. This time she looked different, less polished. Her hair wasn't quite as perfect. There were shadows under her eyes that even her makeup couldn't quite hide. She held a small gift bag in one hand, the kind you grab at the last minute from a drugstore. "Mother Helen," she said, "I'm glad I caught you before you left." I didn't respond. Just waited. She stepped inside, letting the door close behind her. "I wanted to apologize for the other day. I was short with you, and that wasn't fair." "No, it wasn't." She flinched slightly at my tone. Good. Maybe she should feel uncomfortable for once. "Jason wanted me to come," she continued. "He's been so swamped with work, and with the holidays, everything has just been overwhelming." There it was again. Excuses. Always excuses. "Why didn't he come himself?" I asked. "He's in meetings all day, important client presentations, you know how it is." "No, Brooke. I don't know how it is, because I've never been too busy to show up for the people I love when they're lying in a hospital bed." She set the gift bag on the chair. "We brought you something. Just a little care package. Some magazines, nice lotion, chocolates." I looked at the bag but didn't reach for it. Guilt gifts. As if a $5 bag of drugstore candy could somehow make up for abandonment. "Why are you really here?" I asked. She glanced at the door, then back at me. "There's been some talk, family members asking questions, about why Jason wasn't here, about who that man was who signed your paperwork." "His name is Jamal." "Yes, well, people are curious. They're saying things." "What kinds of things?" "That Jason didn't want to be bothered, that he refused to help his own mother." She twisted her hands together. "It's becoming embarrassing." And there it was, the real reason for this visit. Not concern for me, not genuine remorse, just worry about their reputation. "So you're here to do damage control," I said flatly. "That's not fair, isn't it?" I moved slowly toward the chair, my ribs protesting the movement. "Let me ask you something, Brooke. When the hospital called and said I might not make it, what was Jason doing?" "He was hosting." "What was he hosting?" She hesitated. "A Thanksgiving gathering." "For clients?" "For friends and some business associates." "I see. And when the doctor called back a second time, more urgent, saying I needed emergency surgery, what did Jason say?" Her face had gone pale. "Mother Helen, I don't think going over this helps anyone." "What did he say, Brooke?" "He was upset. He didn't know what to do." "That's not what the hospital records show. The records show he said, and I quote, 'If she dies, let me know. I'm not dealing with paperwork tonight.'" I watched her face carefully. "Did you know he said that?" She looked away. "I was in the other room." "But you know now, and you're still making excuses for him. He was drinking, he'd had several glasses of wine, he wasn't thinking clearly." "That makes it worse, Brooke. That makes it so much worse." She sank into the chair, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Look," she said quietly, "I know Jason isn't perfect. I know he can be cold, distant. He doesn't handle emotional situations well. This wasn't an emotional situation. This was life and death. And you're fine now, so everything worked out." The casualness of that statement took my breath away. "Everything worked out?" I repeated. "Brooke, I almost died, and your husband couldn't be bothered to sign a piece of paper. He made a mistake. People make mistakes. Some mistakes are unforgivable." She stood up abruptly. "So what, you're just going to cut him out of your life? Over one bad decision?" "It wasn't one bad decision. It was the final bad decision in a long pattern of bad decisions." I lowered myself carefully onto the edge of the bed. How long has it been since he visited me? 6 months? A year? He's been busy. How long since he called just to talk? Not because he needed something or because it was a holiday, but just to see how I was doing. She didn't answer. How many times have I invited him to dinner and he's canceled at the last minute? How many birthdays has he missed? How many times have I asked to see my grandchildren and been told it's not a good time? You're being unfair. No, Brooke, I'm being honest. Finally, after years of lying to myself, I looked at her directly. Your husband doesn't care about me. Maybe he never did, and I'm done pretending otherwise. You don't mean that. I absolutely mean it. The strength in my voice surprised even me. I've spent 20 years chasing a relationship with someone who doesn't want one. Making excuses, accepting crumbs, telling myself it would get better, but it won't get better, because Jason doesn't want it to be better. He's your son, and I'm his mother, but that hasn't seemed to matter much to him, has it? Brooke's eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't tell if they were genuine or strategic. What do you want from us? Nothing. That's the point. I don't want anything from you anymore. So you're just giving up? No, I'm letting go. There's a difference. I took a breath, feeling the pull in my ribs. I have a friend who dropped everything to be here, who signed paperwork to save my life, who visits me every day, who's taking me into his home to recover. And that friend isn't my son. That friend is someone I knew for maybe 3 years, 15 years ago. Someone I fed some meals and gave some basic kindness to. And he remembered. He showed up. We wanted to show up. But you didn't. When it mattered most, you didn't. The room fell silent, except for the steady beep of the monitors they hadn't disconnected yet. Brooke picked up her purse. I should go. Yes, you should. She walked to the door, then turned back. For what it's worth, I am sorry. About all of it. Are you sorry it happened, or are you sorry people found out? She didn't answer, just opened the door and left. I sat there for a long moment, feeling the weight of that conversation settle over me. Part of me wanted to cry. Part of me wanted to scream, but mostly I just felt tired. The door opened again. I tensed, thinking Brooke had come back, but it was Jamal, carrying a small duffel bag. Brought you some clothes from your apartment, he said. Comfortable stuff for the ride home. Hope I got the right things. He stopped when he saw my face. What happened? Brooke was here. His expression darkened. What did she want? To save face, to make excuses, to convince me that I'm being unreasonable for expecting basic human decency from my own child. Jamal set the bag down and came to sit beside me. And what did you tell her? The truth. That I'm done. How do you feel? I thought about it, really thought about it. Sad. Angry, relieved, all of it at once. That's fair. You're allowed to feel all of those things. She made it sound like I was being petty, like I was throwing away a relationship over nothing. It's not nothing, and you're not throwing it away. He already did that. Jamal handed me the bag. Come on, let's get you changed and out of here. My car's downstairs. I took the bag and went into the small bathroom to change. He'd chosen well. Soft pants with an elastic waist, a loose sweater that wouldn't pull at my stitches, even slippers instead of shoes. When I came out, Jamal had already gathered my few belongings and was talking with a nurse about discharge instructions. A wheelchair appeared. Hospital policy, they said. I didn't argue. As Jamal wheeled me down the hallway toward the elevator, we passed other patients' rooms. I could see families gathered around beds, children visiting grandparents, spouses holding hands, normal scenes of normal people showing normal care for each other. And I thought about how I'd convinced myself for so long that Jason's version of care was normal too. That his distance was just his personality. That I was asking too much by wanting him to actually be present in my life. But it wasn't normal, and I hadn't been asking too much. I'd been asking for the bare minimum, and even that had been too much for him to give. The elevator doors opened. Jamal pushed me inside. As we descended, he said quietly, "You made the right choice, letting go. It doesn't feel right. It will, eventually." The doors opened to the lobby. Cold air hit me as we exited through the automatic doors. Jamal's car was parked right at the curb, a modest sedan with a work van parked behind it. He helped me into the passenger seat with infinite care, making sure I was comfortable before closing the door. Then he loaded my things into the trunk. As we pulled away from the hospital, I looked back at the building one last time. I'd gone in there a mother desperate for her son's love. I was leaving as a woman who'd finally accepted that some people aren't capable of giving what you need. And sometimes, the hardest part of loving someone is knowing when to stop. 3 days into my stay at Jamal's house, my phone rang. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello, Helen, it's your sister-in-law, Patricia. Jason's aunt, my late husband's sister. I hadn't spoken to her in months. Patricia, hello. I just heard about your accident. I'm so sorry, honey. How are you feeling? I'm recovering. Thank you for asking. I tried calling Jason to get details, but he's been very short with me, said everything was handled. She paused. Helen, what's going on? The family is saying some concerning things. I closed my eyes. Of course they were. What are they saying? That Jason wasn't there for you, that someone else had to step in, that there was some kind of falling out. Her voice softened. Is it true? And just like that, the dam broke. I told her everything. The accident, the phone call, Jason's refusal, Jamal signing the papers, the hospital stay, the silence. When I finished, Patricia was quiet for a long moment. That son of mine, she finally said, and I realized she meant my late husband. He'd be ashamed. Absolutely ashamed. It's not his fault. No, but Jason is still his son, his name, and to treat you like that. She took a breath. Helen, we're having a small gathering tomorrow. Just family. A belated Thanksgiving since the actual day was such a disaster. I'd like you to come. My stomach dropped. I don't think that's a good idea. Why not? Your family. You belong there. Jason will be there. Yes, he will. And so will everyone else. And maybe it's time everyone heard the truth. Her voice turned firm. Helen, I love my nephew, but what he did was unacceptable. And if he's been telling people a different story, well, that needs to be corrected. I don't want to cause a scene. Then don't cause a scene. Just come, tell the truth if anyone asks. Let Jason explain himself. She paused. Unless you're afraid. That word stung. Afraid. Was I afraid? Afraid of what exactly? Of confronting my son? Of speaking the truth in front of his family? Maybe I was. Maybe I'd been afraid for years. Afraid of rocking the boat, afraid of making him angry, afraid of losing what little connection we had left. But what connection was there to lose? He'd already made his position clear. What time? I asked. 2 o'clock, my place. And Helen? Bring your friend, the one who helped you. I'd like to meet him. After I hung up, Jamal appeared in the doorway of the guest room. He'd been giving me space, checking on me periodically, but mostly letting me rest. Everything okay? He asked. That was Jason's aunt. She's having a family gathering tomorrow. She wants me to come. Do you want to go? I don't know. Part of me thinks I should just let it go, move on. But another part... I trailed off. Another part wants them to know what really happened. Is that petty? No, it's honest. He came and sat in the chair near the window. You've spent years protecting Jason's image, making excuses for him. Maybe it's time to stop. She wants you to come too. He raised his eyebrows. Me? Why? She wants to meet the person who actually showed up. A smile tugged at his mouth. I'm in if you are. But Miss Helen, I need you to think about what you want from this. Are you going for closure? For confrontation? For vindication? I thought about it. I think I'm going so I can stop wondering. Stop hoping. Stop waiting for him to suddenly become the person I wish he was. Then let's do it. The next day, Jamal drove us to Patricia's house. It was a modest ranch in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place where families gathered and children played in the yard. Cars lined the street, more people than I'd expected. My hands were shaking as we walked up the driveway. You don't have to do this, Jamal reminded me. Yes, I do. Patricia answered the door, pulling me into a careful hug that minded my ribs. She was in her 70s, with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Helen? Oh, honey, look at you. She pulled back, studying my face. You look tired. I am tired. She turned to Jamal and extended her hand. And you must be the guardian angel, Patricia Morrison. Jamal Carter, ma'am. Pleasure to meet you. The pleasure is mine. Any man who steps up the way you did is welcome in my home anytime. She ushered us inside. Everyone's in the living room. Fair warning, Jason's here, with Brooke. The living room was full. I recognized most of them, cousins, aunts, uncles, Jason's grandmother, my late husband's mother, sitting in the place of honor near the fireplace. And there on the couch, looking distinctly uncomfortable, were Jason and Brooke. The room went quiet when I walked in. Jason's face went pale. Brooke's expression was unreadable. "Helen!" Jason's grandmother, Dorothy, called out. "Come here, child. Let me look at you." I made my way over to her, Jamal close behind me. Dorothy took my hands in hers, her grip still strong despite her 90 years. "I heard you were in an accident. How are you healing?" "Slowly, but surely." "And who's this handsome young man?" "This is Jamal. He's a friend." Her eyes sharpened. "The friend who signed your surgery papers." Word traveled fast in this family. "Yes, ma'am." She looked at Jamal for a long moment, then back at Jason, who was studiously avoiding everyone's eyes. "Interesting. Very interesting." Patricia brought us plates of food, insisted we sit. Someone made room on the love seat. Jamal positioned himself between me and the rest of the room, a subtle but clear protective stance. Conversation resumed, but it was stilted, uncomfortable. Everyone was waiting for something to happen. It was Jason's cousin, Michael, who finally broke the tension. "So, Helen, we heard you had quite the ordeal. Must have been scary." "It was." "Jason said you're doing fine now, though." I looked at my son. He was staring at his plate. "I'm alive, if that's what you mean." "And this gentleman," Michael continued, gesturing to Jamal, "he's the one who helped when you needed emergency surgery?" "Yes." Jamal signed the consent forms so the doctors could operate. "That was good of him." Michael paused. "I'm a little confused, though. Why didn't Jason sign them?" The room went completely silent. Jason's head snapped up. "I don't think this is the time or place." "I'd like to know, too," Dorothy said quietly. "Why didn't you sign for your mother, Jason?" Brooke started to speak, but Jason cut her off. "It was a misunderstanding. The hospital didn't make it clear how serious it was." "That's not true," I said. Everyone turned to look at me. "The hospital called you multiple times," I continued, my voice steady. "They told you explicitly that I needed emergency surgery or I might not survive. They begged you to come sign the papers." "Mom, you're twisting what happened." "Am I?" I reached into my purse and pulled out a folded paper. My hands weren't shaking anymore. "This is a transcript of the phone calls. The hospital provided it to me. Would you like me to read what you actually said?" Jason stood up. "This is ridiculous. I'm not going to be ambushed in front of my family." "Sit down, Jason," Dorothy said. Her voice was soft but carried absolute authority. He sat. "Helen," Dorothy continued, "read it." I unfolded the paper, the words I'd read a dozen times already, each time hoping they'd somehow be different. "First call, 7:42 in the evening. Hospital. Is this Jason Whitmore?" "Jason, yeah, who's this?" "Hospital. This is County General Hospital. We have your mother, Helen Whitmore, in our emergency room. She's been in a serious car accident and needs immediate surgery. We need you to come in and sign consent forms." "How serious?" "Life-threatening. Without surgery in the next hour, she may not survive." "I'm hosting Thanksgiving. If she dies, let me know. I'm not dealing with paperwork tonight." I looked up. The room was frozen. Every eye was on Jason. "There were 3 more calls," I said quietly. "Each one more urgent. You didn't answer any of them. Your wife finally answered the 6th call and said you'd deal with it after the holiday." Brooke had tears running down her face. Jason's mouth opened and closed. "I was drunk. I wasn't thinking clearly." "You were sober enough to host a party," Patricia said, her voice cold. "You don't understand the pressure I was under, the people I was trying to impress. More important than